The dim lighting of the Seoul restaurant cast a warm glow across polished wooden tables. The faint scent of grilled meat mingled with the soft hum of conversation. At the far end of the room, a man sat alone, calm, commanding, and unbothered by the casual chatter around him. He was a figure many respected and feared, a Korean Mafia boss whose reputation preceded him. The name was whispered in the city's underworld, but he preferred to stay invisible to the public, enjoying moments of ordinary life like anyone else. He glanced at the menu without interest. His eyes, sharp and alert, scanned the room in subtle, precise movements. Despite the relaxed atmosphere, there was a tension that only someone trained in survival would notice. It wasn't paranoia, it was instinct. Meanwhile, near the entrance, she moved like a quiet storm. A black waitress, petite but radiating an unusual confidence, balanced plates with practiced ease. Her dark eyes flicked over the diners, catching details others would miss. She had learned early on to read people, to sense danger, and to act without hesitation. She had grown up in a world that demanded vigilance, and she carried it into every shift at the restaurant. The restaurant door swung open with a sudden gust of cold air, and 3 men stepped inside. Their movements were synchronized, calculated. They weren't here for dinner. Their eyes immediately locked onto the boss, and a sinister smirk crossed their faces. One of them whispered something, and all 3 tensed. From her station, she noticed immediately. Something about the way they moved, the way their eyes were fixed, triggered an alert deep in her chest. Customers continued chatting, oblivious, but she felt the shift in the air, the kind of shift that screamed trouble. The men advanced. One knocked over a chair carelessly, drawing attention, and the room's soft murmur turned into uneasy silence. "You shouldn't be here," the boss said calmly, standing. His voice, even without anger, carried authority. He didn't panic. He never did. The first man lunged, a knife glinting under the warm restaurant lights. The boss sidestepped with the fluidity of someone who had survived countless encounters, but the knife still grazed his jacket. Time seemed to stretch. The other diners froze, and the quiet restaurant became a stage for violence. And then she moved. The waitress, who moments ago seemed like part of the furniture, was suddenly between the attackers and the boss. She didn't scream. She didn't hesitate. Her movements were precise, almost surgical. With a single motion, she swept one man off balance, knocking the knife from his hand with a tray. The sound of clattering dishes punctuated the action. The boss watched, his sharp eyes narrowing. She wasn't just a waitress. He realized this instantly. 2 of the men turned on her, underestimating her. They thought she was an ordinary employee, someone to push aside. Instead, she pivoted with unexpected speed. Her training, something hidden, something lethal, unfolded seamlessly. A kick to the stomach sent one man sprawling into a table, narrowly missing a frightened customer. A swift movement and the other tripped over a chair, falling in a heap. She moved like water, her every motion controlled yet unpredictable, defensive yet assertive. The boss finally stepped in, but not because she needed him. His presence was enough to make the remaining assailant pause. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't pull a weapon. He simply walked with purpose, his presence a silent declaration of power. The 3 attackers, now realizing this was not a simple mugging or intimidation, hesitated. That hesitation was all the boss and the waitress needed. In seconds, the fight was over. The men fled, leaving chaos and broken furniture behind. The restaurant erupted into stunned murmurs and scattered applause. Some diners whispered excitedly to one another. The staff looked at her with awe, some shaking their heads in disbelief. She adjusted her apron, her expression calm, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. The boss's gaze lingered on her. He approached slowly, carefully. "I didn't expect that." His voice carried a mix of curiosity and amusement, edged with respect. "I don't usually fight people during dinner service," she replied, her tone steady, almost teasing. She had never been one to flaunt her skills, but something about him made her want to speak honestly. "Clearly," he said, his lips twitching slightly into a hint of a smile. "You handle yourself well." "I've had to," she said simply. Her eyes didn't waver. Where I come from, you learn fast or you don't last. He nodded slowly, studying her. There was something magnetic in the way she carried herself. Not just skill, but confidence, intelligence, and an undercurrent of something more, something deeper, guarded yet real. The sound of a fallen chair drew both their attention. She moved quickly to right it, brushing off her hands as though the previous events were merely an inconvenience. The boss noticed her attention to detail, her care for the space, even in chaos. It was rare to see someone who combined skill with empathy so seamlessly. "Why are you here?" she asked finally, curious about his presence in the city and this restaurant. "I'm looking for something," he said vaguely. He didn't elaborate, but there was a softness in his gaze that hinted at layers beneath his tough exterior. Something in him was intrigued, not just by her skill, but by the way she had handled herself without fear, without a hint of submission. She raised an eyebrow. "Looking for something, or someone?" He smirked, just slightly, enough to convey amusement without arrogance. "Perhaps both," he admitted. The restaurant staff, now regaining some composure, began to return to their duties, though whispers of the fight still rippled through the room. Customers lingered, stealing glances. Some secretly relieved the danger had passed. The boss and the waitress remained in a quiet bubble amidst the chaos, two worlds colliding. He, a man used to commanding fear and respect. She, someone used to navigating the world with vigilance, skills hidden beneath the guise of normalcy. "I should go," she said after a moment, straightening her uniform. "Orders to take, tables to manage." He shook his head, intrigued. "No," he said firmly, though not harshly. "Stay. Let's talk." Her lips pressed into a thin line, considering, then slowly, she nodded. Something about him, about the calm power he exuded, sparked curiosity she hadn't felt in a long time. He motioned for her to lead the way to a quiet corner, away from prying eyes and whispers. As they walked, the hum of the restaurant faded into background noise, leaving a space where something unexpected began to stir. She glanced at him, a flicker of amusement in her eyes. "You don't seem like the type to eat out casually." "I'm not," he admitted, his tone even, almost confessional. "But sometimes, even I need to see life outside my walls. Even I need perspective." She chuckled softly, the sound light and genuine. "Perspective, huh? I've got plenty of that. Probably more than you'd guess." He looked at her, curiosity deepening. He had seen many skilled fighters, many dangerous individuals, but there was something different about her. Something authentic, layered, magnetic. And in that moment, amid the clatter of trays and the quiet tension of the aftermath, an unspoken connection began. Two people from completely different worlds, drawn together by chaos, skill, and a strange sense of understanding. For the first time in a long while, the Mafia boss felt a spark, not of danger, but of intrigue. And the waitress, who had hidden her talents for so long, felt the faintest pull of curiosity in return. Neither of them knew where this would lead, but for the first time in years, the world felt slightly different, slightly more alive. And as the night wrapped itself around the city of Seoul, two lives began to inch toward one another in ways neither could have anticipated. The quiet corner of the restaurant offered a small sanctuary, away from the chatter of recovering diners and the clinking of dishes. She poured them both water, her hands steady, betraying no sign of the adrenaline that still lingered beneath her skin. "You don't often get into fights like that," he said, leaning back slightly, observing her carefully. "Most people would have screamed, called the cops, or hidden." "I'm not most people," she replied with a small smile, setting the glasses on the table. Her eyes, dark and focused, met his without hesitation. "I've had to deal with a lot more than 3 thugs in my life. Trust me." He leaned forward, intrigued. "Really? And what kind of life teaches a waitress to handle 3 men trained to attack someone like that?" Her smile faded just slightly. Memories flickered in her mind. Long nights waiting tables while her child slept in a cramped apartment, school fights, street corners that weren't safe. "A life that doesn't give you the luxury of being weak," she said quietly. "You either learn to protect yourself, or you get crushed." The boss regarded her silently, impressed, though he didn't let his admiration show too obviously. Most people he met talked a big game. Few could back it up. And she didn't need to talk. Her actions spoke for her. "You've got discipline," he said finally. "Focus. Reflexes. Control." "I survive," she said, shrugging. "That's all. Control is just part of it." For a moment, they were quiet. Outside, the city of Seoul pulsed with life. Car horns, distant shouts, and the occasional bark of a stray dog blended into a low hum. Inside the restaurant, the soft glow of the lights made the space feel intimate, deceptively calm after the chaos that had erupted only moments before. "So," he said, breaking the silence, "what's your story? How did a girl like you end up here, in a place like this?" She paused. She wasn't used to strangers asking, and certainly not men like him, men who could intimidate with just a look. But something about him felt different. Curious, yes, but not prying. Respectful. She decided to give him a piece of her story, the kind that hinted at survival but didn't reveal everything. "Life brought me here," she said, carefully choosing her words. "I've worked in a lot of restaurants, learned a lot of skills that people don't see. People think I'm just serving food. I'm not. I'm watching. I'm learning. I'm ready." He tilted his head, studying her. "Ready for what?" "Whatever comes," she said, meeting his gaze steadily. "Life doesn't give you warning signs." The Mafia boss nodded slowly. There was a tension in her words, a truth he couldn't ignore. Most people lived in ignorance of danger, believing the world was fair. She didn't. And in that, he recognized something rare: awareness, courage, and a mind capable of thinking on its feet. "You saved my life," he said suddenly, voice low and even. "Not many people could have done that." "It wasn't about saving you," she replied, her tone calm. "It was about stopping them. That's all. You were just unlucky enough to be the target." He chuckled softly, the sound deep and unexpected. "Unlucky, huh? I don't often hear people describe my life that way." "You probably like to pretend nothing gets to you," she said with a smirk. "But everyone has a weak point. Everyone." He didn't argue. He just nodded, his eyes tracing the contours of her face, noting the determination in her posture, the fire in her gaze. "You know," he said after a pause, "I've seen a lot of people in my line of work. Fighters, enforcers, killers. But you're different. You don't fight for money. You don't fight for fear. You fight for yourself." She shrugged lightly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I fight because I have to. That's the difference." The boss leaned back, the corners of his mouth lifting into the faintest smirk. "You're not the type to be intimidated easily," he said. "I like that." "I don't like being intimidated," she replied, playful but firm. "I survive, and I make sure I'm ready for anything." There was a pause, a quiet understanding settling between them. The noise of the restaurant faded into the background, and for a few moments, it felt like it was just the two of them, the chaotic world outside the wall somehow distant and irrelevant. "You have a child, don't you?" he asked suddenly, his voice softer now, almost careful. He didn't pry aggressively, he simply observed. Her heart skipped slightly. He'd noticed. She hadn't even mentioned it. "Yeah," she said quietly. "A little boy. He's my world. Everything I do for him." He nodded, the hint of a smile returning. "I can respect that," he said. "It takes strength to raise someone alone, to survive and care for them without faltering." She felt an unexpected warmth in his words. Most people in her life judged, underestimated, or tried to take advantage. He didn't. There was respect, even admiration. It was strange to feel so seen, so understood. "Why are you being nice to me?" she asked, half laughing, half serious. "You don't usually do that, right?" "Maybe I'm curious," he said carefully, watching her reaction. "Or maybe I recognize talent when I see it. And you're far from ordinary." She laughed softly, a sound that was both relieved and cautious. Talent? I'm just a waitress who can handle herself. He shook his head, a small, bemused smile on his lips. There's more to you than that. I can see it. Their conversation lingered, light yet layered. Beneath the casual tones, a tension started building, a pull neither of them fully understood yet. Respect and curiosity were mixing, creating something heavier, something that might grow into something far more complicated. You know, he said after another pause, I don't often meet people like you. People who aren't impressed by what I have or what I do. People who don't fear me outright. You are different. She studied him, her dark eyes reflecting something he hadn't anticipated. Interest and maybe a little mischief. Different good or different bad. He leaned forward, gaze unwavering. Different, in a way I want to understand. For a moment, neither spoke. Around them, life went on. The restaurant hummed with normalcy once more, but at this small table in the corner, two lives had collided in a way that neither could ignore. And as she sipped her water, a small thought crept into her mind. Maybe, just maybe, there was more to this dangerous, mysterious man than she'd assumed. Maybe he wasn't just a mafia boss. Maybe he was something she hadn't expected at all, someone who could change her life in ways she didn't yet understand. And he, watching her with a quiet intensity, realized that she was more than a waitress, more than a survivor. She was a spark, unexpected and fierce, and he wasn't sure if he wanted to walk away. For the first time in a long time, he felt intrigued. And for the first time in a long time, she felt curiosity, not fear, stir inside her. The next few days passed in a blur for her. The restaurant hummed as usual, orders coming and going, trays clattering, and customers chattering. Yet beneath the normal rhythm, she couldn't shake the image of him, the calm, imposing figure who had walked into her life like a storm she didn't know was coming. He hadn't called. He hadn't sent a message. And yet, she felt a strange awareness that he was out there, somewhere in the city, watching or waiting. A part of her didn't want to admit it, but a small, curious flutter grew every time she thought of him. Then he appeared again. Not at the restaurant this time, but across the street in a small cafe she sometimes frequented after her shifts. She froze for a moment when she saw him, sipping coffee, eyes scanning the street as if expecting someone, or something. "Hello," he said casually when he saw her notice him. His tone was light, but there was a subtle command in it that made her step closer. "Hello," she replied, keeping her voice steady, though her heart was racing. She didn't usually meet people like him outside of chaotic circumstances. The idea of a normal conversation, in a normal setting, with him was strange. He gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Sit," he said simply. She hesitated. The instinct to flee, to stay cautious, was still strong. But curiosity and the unspoken pull from before made her sit. She crossed her arms loosely, keeping a watchful eye. "I wanted to make sure you were okay after that night," he said quietly. "Not just because of the attackers, but because of how you handled it." Her lips pressed into a thin line. Most people, when they said things like that, meant to flatter or to assert dominance. But he seemed genuine. She had met people like him before, people in power, used to being feared, but he carried no condescension in his words. "I'm fine," she said finally. "The attackers? Not much more than a nuisance." She studied him carefully, noticing the way he observed her, as if he was cataloging every detail. You, on the other hand, seemed unshaken. Not many people stay calm when attacked. "Experience," he replied simply, his tone even, but his eyes softened slightly. "You learn to control the chaos around you instead of letting it control you." A pause hung between them, heavy with unspoken understanding. The cafe bustled quietly around them, but their small corner seemed insulated from the world. "You have a child, right?" he asked again, but this time it wasn't subtle. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze fixed on her, probing yet respectful. "Yes," she admitted. "A little boy. Everything I do for him." He nodded, quietly impressed. "Strong," he said simply. To balance life and danger and still be responsible for someone else. She felt warmth at his words, though she didn't show it openly. Most people saw her as a waitress, someone ordinary, someone easily overlooked. Yet he saw her. Not just her skills, but her strength, her heart, her commitment. "You've got a fire in you," he said, almost conversationally, but it wasn't just casual. "Not many people have that." "I've had to," she said quietly. "Life doesn't give you chances to be soft." He leaned back in his chair, a faint smile forming on his lips. "I can tell." For a moment, silence fell. The tension between them was subtle, almost electric. He wasn't just interested in her skill or her bravery, he was interested in her. And she felt a spark of intrigue, a curious warmth that she couldn't ignore. Then the conversation shifted. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "I have a problem," he said, "and I think you can help me." She raised an eyebrow, curious despite herself. "I'm not a problem solver for mob bosses," she said lightly, though her mind raced. She didn't want to admit the thrill of curiosity she felt. "This isn't like that," he said, meeting her gaze. "I need someone who can think fast, who's smart and capable. Someone who isn't afraid to act when others hesitate. You fit that description." She felt a thrill she hadn't felt in years. Danger, yes, but also excitement. Her life had been predictable, survival-driven, but here was someone offering something different. Something she couldn't quite name yet. "I don't know if I'm your person," she said cautiously. "I've never done anything like this outside of protecting myself." "That's exactly why I need you," he said firmly, his eyes locking with hers. "You act, and you survive, without needing validation. You're not afraid of consequences because you already know how to handle them." Her lips parted slightly, surprise evident on her face. He didn't flinch, didn't look away. There was a seriousness to him now, a rare vulnerability hidden beneath the calm exterior. "You're asking me to trust you," she said slowly, carefully choosing her words. "I don't do that easily." "I'm aware," he replied. "But I think we understand each other more than you realize." Her heart beat faster. There was a strange thrill in his presence, a magnetic pull she hadn't felt before. And she realized, reluctantly, that she wanted to know more, not just about the offer he was making, but about the man himself. "I'm listening," she said finally, her voice steady but carrying an edge of curiosity. "Good," he said with a faint smile. "Because I think this will be interesting." As they spoke, the line between danger and trust blurred. She had always been wary, always cautious, but something about him made the world feel different. And in the quiet of that cafe, an unspoken connection began to grow, tentative and fragile, but undeniably real. The city outside bustled, oblivious to the moment unfolding inside the small corner. And as they continued to talk, sharing small insights into their lives, their experiences, and their thoughts, an invisible thread began to tie them together, a thread neither had expected, yet neither could ignore. By the time she left the cafe, the air between them was charged with possibility. The danger had not disappeared, the world they lived in was far too unpredictable for that, but for the first time in years, she felt something more than just survival. And he, watching her leave, felt the pull of intrigue, curiosity, and something deeper he hadn't felt in a long time. For both of them, life had shifted in ways neither could have anticipated. The following evening, the restaurant was quieter than usual. She moved between tables with her usual calm efficiency, though a subtle tension hummed under her skin. Something about the previous night's conversation, and the strange pull she felt toward him, lingered like an echo. She had barely begun her shift when he appeared again, slipping in through the door as if the restaurant had been waiting for him. His presence drew attention, though he moved with such quiet authority that no one dared confront him. She felt a flutter of nerves and something else, something unfamiliar, at the sight of him. "You're persistent," she said lightly as she approached him. He smirked faintly. "I prefer the word interested." She raised an eyebrow, unconsciously smoothing her apron. "Interested in what? Me or trouble?" "Both, perhaps," he replied evenly. His eyes scanned the room briefly before settling back on her. The trouble isn't far behind. Her stomach tightened. She had a feeling he wasn't exaggerating. In his world, trouble rarely came announced. It arrived quietly, or violently, or both. And sure enough, it came. The first man from the attack, the one who had tried to charge her, stepped through the entrance with two others, faces set and dangerous. It was clear they had regrouped, determined to finish what they had started. She didn't panic. Her instincts, honed by years of vigilance, took over. She assessed the room, the tables, the exits, the layout, and her opponent's postures. Her hands flexed slightly at her sides, ready for whatever came next. He noticed immediately. "You're ready," he said quietly, almost approvingly. "I like that." "They're not going to get the chance to test me," she replied with quiet determination. The men advanced. The tension in the room thickened, and some diners hurried out, sensing danger. But she didn't hesitate. In an instant, she moved, intercepting the first attacker with a swift kick to the midsection. He stumbled back into a table, knocking it over with a crash that echoed through the restaurant. Her movements were precise, practiced, and almost fluid. Each step she took was calculated, each strike measured. She didn't hesitate, didn't falter, and didn't scream. The boss stepped in as well, moving with calm authority. He didn't need to raise his voice or wield a weapon. The mere presence of him caused the remaining attackers to pause, uncertain. But she handled most of the work. Her skill, hidden for so long, became visible in full force. It wasn't just physical prowess, it was strategic thinking. She anticipated their moves, guided them away from civilians, and neutralized threats efficiently. One man went down with a careful sweep of her leg, another tripped over a chair she had nudged into his path. The fight was over as quickly as it had begun. The attackers fled, leaving chaos and broken furniture behind. And once again, the room held its breath, stunned by what had just occurred. The boss studied her silently for a moment, a rare softness in his gaze. "You're remarkable," he said quietly. "Not many people survive a night like this and walk away unshaken." "I'm used to it," she replied simply, brushing off her hands. "Life doesn't give warnings. You act, or you don't." He nodded slowly, admiration clear despite the calm exterior. "And yet, you're more than just a fighter. You care. You protect. That's rare." She felt a small warmth at his words, the faintest tug in her chest. It wasn't fear, not really. It was respect, recognition, and perhaps something deeper that she didn't yet understand. For the next hour, they stayed in the restaurant, speaking quietly while staff tried to restore order. He asked about her life, her son, her past, and she answered cautiously, revealing small pieces at a time. "You're unlike anyone I've ever met," he said finally, his voice low and thoughtful. "Most people would either fear me or try to impress me. You just are." "Maybe that's because I've had to survive on my own," she replied softly. "People who need to impress usually don't last long where I come from." He smiled faintly, a rare, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "I think I like that about you." There was a pause, charged and heavy with unspoken thoughts. The city outside continued its constant pulse, oblivious to the tension and connection building inside. "You don't have to answer this now," he said cautiously, "but would you consider working with me? Not as an employee, not as a fighter, but as someone I can trust to handle the unexpected." Her heart skipped. The offer was both thrilling and frightening. She had never been asked to trust anyone in such a way, let alone someone from a world so different from hers. "I don't know if I can," she admitted honestly. "I've lived by my own rules for too long." "I'm not asking for blind trust," he said gently. "Just a chance to show you that I'm different. That I respect strength, skill, and heart. That I respect you." Her pulse quickened. Respect wasn't something she often received from powerful men. Most tried to dominate or control. This man, he acknowledged her entirely. And the pull she felt toward him, curiosity, intrigue, something warmer, was undeniable. "Maybe," she said slowly, "I'll consider it." But I won't be anyone's weapon. Not for free, and not without knowing the stakes. He nodded, as though he expected nothing less. Fair, he said. I like that too. For the first time since he had entered her life, she felt a strange comfort in his presence. There was tension, yes, and danger, but also understanding. Respect. And, she realized reluctantly, something else. A pull, a curiosity about him she couldn't explain. And he, watching her carefully, felt the first sparks of fascination with her. Not just her skill, her bravery, or her resilience, but the whole person. Fierce, independent, and capable, yet capable of warmth and understanding. The night ended with them stepping out into the soul streets together, not as enemies, not as strangers, but as two people beginning to understand the possibility of something more. Friendship, trust, maybe even a fragile, tentative connection that could grow into something neither had expected. And as the city lights reflected off the wet pavement, the tension of danger softened, replaced by a quiet, thrilling uncertainty, one neither of them could resist. The morning after the cafe meeting, she found herself replaying the events of the last few days over and over. The adrenaline from the attacks had faded, but the memory of him, the calm authority, the subtle humor, and the undeniable magnetism, lingered in her mind. She had survived countless challenges, yet this was different. There was something about him that unsettled her in the most unexpected way, a mixture of respect, intrigue, and curiosity. She poured coffee into a small cup, staring out the window at the bustling streets of Seoul. Mothers hustled children along crosswalks, office workers rushed to trains, and street vendors called to passers-by. Life moved fast, but her thoughts kept circling back to him. A shadow fell across her table. She looked up and found him standing there, coat draped over one arm, a faint, teasing smile on his face. "You think too much," he said lightly, sliding into the chair opposite her. "I don't think too much," she said defensively, though her heart betrayed her with a subtle quickening. "I just consider all possibilities." "Ah," he said, leaning back. "A survivor. Always calculating, always ready. I like that. But maybe sometimes, just sometimes, you can stop calculating." She raised an eyebrow, skeptical yet intrigued. "And risk what?" "A moment," he said softly, his gaze steady and unwavering. "A connection. Something real, not just survival." Her breath caught slightly. Most men she'd encountered, powerful or otherwise, had never spoken like that. They demanded respect, submission, or fear. He asked for understanding. Not blind trust, not control, not dominance. Just space, respect, recognition. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed. A message flashed on the screen, "They're back." Her body tensed instinctively. The attackers from before, the ones who had tried and failed, had returned. He noticed immediately. "We need to move," he said quietly, rising to his feet. His calm authority returned, the subtle softness from moments ago replaced with sharp focus. She followed without hesitation. Her instincts were on high alert, adrenaline quickening her senses. She wasn't just a waitress now, she was a protector, a strategist, a fighter who had learned to anticipate danger before it arrived. They slipped through back alleys, the bustling city fading into quieter streets. He walked beside her, and despite the danger, she felt a small thread of comfort in his presence. It wasn't fear she felt, it was trust, tentative and fragile, but there nonetheless. They arrived at a nondescript building, the kind that could be easily overlooked by anyone who wasn't looking for it. He opened the door for her, then gestured for her to enter first. Inside, the room was dimly lit but organized, almost sterile. Equipment was neatly arranged, papers and files stacked with precision. He turned to her, eyes locking with hers. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded, tightening her ponytail and adjusting her jacket. "Always." The attackers burst in moments later, 3 men determined, their confidence fueled by previous failure. But this time, she was prepared. The boss remained calm, watching, guiding, but she was the first line of defense. Her movements were a blur of precision and strategy. She intercepted the first man, twisting his arm and sending him sprawling into a table. The second moved toward the boss, but but she anticipated it, sweeping his legs out from under him. The third tried to flank them, but she pivoted, catching him off guard with a swift maneuver that left him groaning on the floor. He didn't intervene unless necessary. When he did, it was subtle, redirecting a threat, disarming a man who underestimated him, maintaining control without overstepping. Together, they formed a seamless unit, her instincts, his authority, both complementing each other perfectly. The attackers, realizing once again they were outmatched, fled into the night. The quiet after their departure was almost deafening. She leaned against a table, catching her breath, while he approached slowly. "You didn't just survive," he said softly, admiration clear in his voice. "You dominated. With grace, with skill, with heart. Not many could do that." Her chest rose and fell rapidly, adrenaline still coursing through her. "I didn't do it for you," she said, trying to regain her composure. "I did it because it had to be done. Because someone had to stop them." He smiled faintly, tilting his head. "And yet, you saved me. Not just physically, but in a way I didn't realize I needed." She looked at him, suddenly aware of the pull between them, the unspoken understanding, the tentative connection that had grown stronger with each encounter. "I've never," she began, voice soft, "never met anyone like you." "Nor I you," he admitted quietly. "You're extraordinary. Fierce, independent, capable, and yet, I sense something more. Something I want to understand." A silence fell, heavy with possibility. The danger had passed, but the tension between them remained, charged with something unspoken yet undeniable. She realized, with surprising clarity, that her life had changed. Not because of the fights, not because of the threats, but because of him, his presence, his respect, his intrigue. "I don't know what this is," she said finally, truthfully. "But I want to see where it goes." He reached out subtly, just a hand brushing hers, a gesture filled with promise rather than pressure. "Neither do I," he said softly. For the first time in a long while, she felt something beyond survival, beyond caution. She felt curiosity, connection, and perhaps the faintest stirrings of something deeper. And he, standing close with quiet intensity, realized that she was more than just a fighter, more than just a survivor. She was a force of nature, a spark of life he hadn't expected, and one he was unwilling to ignore. As the city lights of Seoul glimmered through the window, they stood together, two lives intertwined by chance, courage, and unspoken understanding. Outside, the world moved on, but in that moment, nothing else mattered. They had faced danger, chaos, and uncertainty, and yet, in each other, they had found something rare, something real. And in that quiet, fleeting moment, the beginning of their story, one of respect, intrigue, and perhaps love, truly began.